He's wrapping up a black comedy thriller about what happens when the nation's capital gets attacked by terrorist magicians. You might know him as the guy who looks like a disoriented Santa Claus after a week-long binge. Please welcome Terry Irving to the stage.
Thank you to all the people who have been thanked 6 times already. Consider yourselves thanked again. I'm Terry Irving, and I have the true story of an honest, hard-working man with an open heart who's surrounded in a world of black evil. Oh wait, I'm not supposed to talk about my publisher and the PR. This is from my book, which is Courier. Courier is set in 1972, which sadly people describe as being as historical as yours, Charles. It is set in the Watergate era. It's the hero is a motorcycle courier, a Vietnam veteran who makes his living by carrying film to the TV networks. And this is just one little section of the book. That afternoon, TV news courier Rick Putnam had one of those days that happen from time to time when it seemed as if the assignment desk had simply forgotten. He was sent to the White House to pick up some press handouts, but when he got there, it turned out that one of the reporters had already taken them back to the bureau. He called in and was told just to stay put and wait. There would be a stand-up to take back later. He was sitting on a leather couch in the back of the briefing room, reduced to reading a year-old copy of The Atlantic, when senior White House correspondent Jamie Mayweather slumped into the seat next to him and growled, "What the hell are you doing?" "Reading about the war." "Screw reading about it. I was there. Ask me about it." Rick didn't bother to mention that he'd been there as well. "Why did the peace talks fall up?" "You mean after they'd finally settled on a shape for the table? They probably went to hell for the same reason they went to hell in '68. Q pulled the plug." Mayweather leaned back and stretched his shoulders. This is acting. "About a week before the elections, it looked like maybe President Johnson would get a deal, and Hubert Humphrey, the happy warrior, would coast into the Oval Office. But the South Vietnamese suddenly got a bug up their butts." He snapped his fingers. "Presto change, Joe. No more peace talks. And Tricky Dick's moving truck is pulling up outside the front doors of the White House." "You think Nixon had anything to do with that?" "I think lots of things. I only talk about things I can prove." After a second, Mayweather continued. "But it was damn convenient. On the other hand, you'd think that Q would have a good reason to like Democrats. After all, it was Democrats who pulled the rug out from under his predecessor and gave him the keys to the palace." Rick nodded. "Yeah, I'd heard that, but it was never proved." "None of this shit is ever proved. Watergate isn't proved. The fact that there are stacks of $100 bills sitting around in people's safes isn't proved. Hell, Oswald being a team player isn't proved." Mayweather jumped to his feet and headed back to the booth. "Time for me to prove that I can pull a rabbit out of my ass for the 6 o'clock. Like most of Rick's conversations with Mayweather, it ended without a goodbye. That's fiction. Now this is fact, which, as it turns out, pretty well defines Noir. In late October 1968, the race for president between Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey was too close to call. President Lyndon Baines Johnson had announced that he would not run for re-election back in March, and he said then that U.S. bombing of North Vietnam would stop, except in limited areas. For months, he had been secretly offering to end all bombing in return for concessions, in particular, face-to-face negotiations at the Paris peace talks between the governments of North and South Vietnam. In October, North Vietnam finally agreed on enough major points that LBJ was ready to announce a complete bombing halt and the beginning of peace talks. It wasn't made public, but LBJ had personally explained this to all the candidates. NSA intercept of a diplomatic telegram from the South Vietnamese ambassador to President Q. "The elections will take place in a week. and President Johnson would probably have difficulties in forcing our hand. I am still in contact with the Nixon entourage, which continues to be the favorite despite the uncertainty provoked by the news of an imminent bombing halt. On Tuesday, 1 week before the election, a Wall Street executive told the White House that the Nixon campaign was working to persuade the South Vietnamese to put off any negotiations until after the election. A key intermediary was Anna Chennault, the widow of the general who led the Flying Tigers in World War II. President Johnson ordered FBI surveillance and wiretaps placed on the South Vietnamese embassy and had Chennault followed. The NSA was already picking off all diplomatic telegrams between the embassy and Saigon, and the CIA had bugged President Thu's office. All of these things were probably illegal, politically explosive, and very effective. Wednesday, 6 days before the election, phone call between President Johnson and Senator Everett Dirksen, the highest elected Republican. Everett, first of all, now I cannot tell you this if it's going to be quoted, because I can't tell the candidates and I can't tell anybody else. I'll give you my solemn word. We know what Q says when he talks out in Vietnam. We know what happens here. And some of Mr. Nixon's people are getting a little bit unbalanced and frightened. Last week they started going into the South Vietnamese embassy and also sending some word to Hanoi, which has prolonged this thing a good deal. Yeah. The net of it, and it is despicable, and if it were made public, I think it would rock the nation, but the net of it was that if they could hold out just a little longer, that he, meaning Nixon, is a lot more sympathetic, and he can kind of, they can do better business with him than they can with their president. Now, I'd rather doubt Nixon has done any of this, but there's no question but what his folks are doing. Yeah. I don't think the people would approve it if it was known. Yeah. Saturday, 3 days before the election. Headline in the New York Times. Q says Saigon cannot join Paris talks under present plan. Nixon statement, same morning. In view of early reports this morning, progress for peace are not as bright as they were even a few days ago. A Nixon source told reporters that Johnson had assured all the candidates that South Vietnam would sit down in Paris. And a, quote, Nixon confidant said, we had the impression that all the diplomatic ducks were in a row. FBI telex Wednesday. Mrs. Anna Chennault contacted Vietnamese Ambassador Bui Diem, I can't do that, and advised him that she had received a message from her boss, not further identified, where her boss wanted her to give personally to the ambassador the message that the ambassador was to hold on, we're going to win. 1 hour later, phone call between President Johnson and Senator Dirksen. Here's the latest information we got. The agent said that they just talked to the boss. And that he says you must hold on. Just hold on until after the election. Yeah. Now I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't be doing this. This is treason. I know. Let me repeat that. Johnson just said, this is treason. And Dirksen answers, I know. The reason for this is on the next page. For those of you who slept through civics, the Logan Act of 1799 prohibits as treasonous activity any interference by American citizens with the negotiations of the U.S. government. Sunday, 2 days before the election, phone call to the LBJ ranch. Hello? This is Dick Nixon. I can't do it. Yes, I just wanted you to know that I got a report from Reverend Dirksen with regard to your call, and I just want to meet the press, and I said that when I meet the press, that I had given you my personal assurance that I would do everything possible to cooperate with you before the election and if elected after the election. I just wanted you to know that I feel very, very strongly about this. And any rumblings around about somebody trying to sabotage the Saigon government's attitude, there can certainly have absolutely no credibility as far as I'm concerned. Again, a bit of translation for those of you who missed the 70s. Absolutely no credibility as far as I'm concerned is not the same as no, we didn't do it. It's a non-denial denial. Johnson. The other day we had talked to Chew. We agreed to the communique. Then the traffic goes out that Nixon will do better by you. Now that goes to Chew. I didn't say, as I said to you the other day, I didn't say that it was with your knowledge. I hope it wasn't. No. All right, I gotta break it again. Sorry, but another little note. There is a debate whether Nixon said, no, I didn't do it, or no, I can't believe it. I listened to it, and I can't tell, but in the end, it really doesn't matter, because Nixon is lying. He's been actually working with the South Vietnamese since July. Mr. Nixon, I would never do anything to encourage Hanoi. I mean, Saigon, not to come to the table. Good God, we want them over in Paris. We've got to get them to Paris, or you can't have a peace. Well, I'll be in touch with you after Tuesday. Well, anyway, we'll have fun. Thank you, Dick. Bye. We'll have fun. 2 days later, Nixon narrowly won by less than 1% of the vote. According to the U.S. Archives, over 58,000 Americans died in the Vietnam conflict. More than 21,000 Americans died after January of 1969, the month that Richard Nixon was sworn in as President of the United States. The illegally obtained evidence, known as the X envelope, was taken from the White House by Johnson's staff and hidden. A group was formed by the Nixon administration to search for these and other politically dangerous documents. At one point, they were thought to be in a safe at the Brookings Institution. President Nixon, on June 17, 1971, God damn it! Get in there and get those files! Blow the safe and get it! Exactly 1 year to the day after Nixon first ordered the Brookings break-in, another operation planned by the same two agents took place at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate apartment